You could have given up, but you didn't. You could have stopped believing, but you didn't. You could have kept living their expectations, but you decided to make this life your own. And in turn, you're here. Hello, everyone. So today we're meeting Robert Wright. He is an author, a speaker, a leadership, and also executive coach. Hello, Robert. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Anna. It's great to be with you and with your listeners.
Thank you. So let's start a conversation by diving into your journey of becoming the person you are today. What led you to discover your true passion in life? How did it start for you?
Anna, it's kind of three chapters. So the first chapter is a little rough and a little wonderful. I grew up in poverty and abuse and those things that make a good movie, I suppose. And but by the time I was 17, I had the highest rated radio show in the state of Wisconsin and was named most likely to succeed by my graduating class from secondary school. And I spent the next 10 years making my fellow students wrong for electing me. I had an early marriage and it failed, and I felt horribly guilty about that. I had a heart problem. I had 3 heart attacks, and my little business was struggling. And that brings us to chapter 2, which is a friend of mine pushed me into one of the early human potential movement trainings, a little 4-day program. And it sounds like a cliche all these years later that it changed my life for the better. And so that started chapter 2. I enrolled a lot of people in that training because even though I didn't understand it intellectually, I knew it was good for me. I knew it was good for other people. So they found out about me, and that led to the chapter 2, which was them hiring me as the president of that company. So I spent 4 years expanding them around the world and having a wonderful experience for a young guy. Learned a lot, had the incredible pleasure of working with a true genius, the founder of that company, Alexander Everett. And the ownership changed. I quit. I started a company called LifeSpring that ended up being very successful in the US, and sold it to the staff and moved to Asia. And we could talk for half an hour about that, but I did found a company there called ARC International. Those 2 companies have graduated over 1 million people from these high impact experiential learning events. So that's a large part of my life. Chapter 3 is that I kind of retired at 46. I moved to Aspen, Colorado. I skied, 60, 70 days a year. I remarried. I had 2 birth children, and we adopted 2 special needs kids. I traveled with the late John Denver. I had a lot of fun, and took my eye off the ball. Led to the failure of my business and firing 240 people. Was no fun, and also having the love of my life leave me for a lawyer, which I don't recommend to anyone. If you're going to get divorced, that's not the best way to do it. That was pretty unpleasant. And I went back to work. So I'm, as you mentioned, I coach, I mentor, I work with senior executives around issues both of business and integrating their personal life into their total life. So, and as you know, I wrote a book and did a recorded program for Nightingale Conant, and a lot of things that are just interesting to me.
Yeah, you mentioned how you started with the human potential idea that kind of got you interested in that self-development work, and where you saw yourself as, making more of impact because you were starting like working on yourself, but also you knew that it was important for other people to know. So I would like to explore more of what do you think important factors, or I would say areas of our life we should be focusing on, and how can we cultivate the right habits that would bring us to that mindset where we know that we can do more.
In the work that I do with executives, the promise is that there's going to be a shift in their attitudes, their habits, and their behaviors. But under that are three other activities that seem to, in my experience, both personally, but also in working with many people, there are three things that need to happen for any of us. We can say we want to just shift an attitude or a habit, and then we wonder why we're struggling with it. And of course, what that's sourced in is, in my experience, is three things. First of all, there's a need for all of us to complete our past. It's like, any person that's reasonably successful has done something that our former president, Bill Clinton, was famous for, which is compartmentalizing. And that is, we take any blame, shame, guilt, regret, and even past success, and we stuff it. It becomes part of our belief system, but it's usually not conscious. And until we take the negative energy off of that, shifting an attitude, a habit, or a behavior is extremely difficult. So the first work that I always do with people, and that I recommend to others, is that you find someone that's skilled in helping you take that negative energy, that past that you're carrying around. The picture for me is like having a backpack with 50 kilograms of rocks in it. It's pretty hard to run through life when you're carrying all that extra weight. The second piece, I like how the Buddhists talk about it. They talk about developing a selfless regard for reality. And that is learning to better tell the truth about your reality, and just getting real about your story. We, particularly successful people, already successful, live in a story, and it serves us. And most of the time, that's why we adopt the story. But sometimes we're stuck in the story and it's not really connected to our reality. I remember a guy, I was training a trainer, so I'm in the back of the room, and the trainer is working with a student on anger, and particularly on his relationships. And I recall that the trainer said, we hold the mirror up to people in those high impact programs, and the trainer did that. He was doing a good job. He said, but you're really angry with your wife, and that's your story. You're living in that story. And the guy said, no, I'm not. First of all, his voice betrayed his anger, but secondly, he started doing this. He said, I love that girl. I really love her.
Wow.
And he showed in every way that his story and reality were not aligned for him. So the second piece, after you do some work on completing your past, is to learn to better tell the truth about your reality, and to live in a new story. And the final piece is, if you've done those first two, then you've created a space for you to develop a compelling vision that is freely chosen. Most of us think that our vision for the future is freely chosen, and frankly, it's not. It's part of that story thing. It's mired in the past, and it's about, I went to this university, which wasn't top ranked, and therefore I can't declare this big vision. Or this happened to me, or in my case, one of my excuses for many years was that, and it's true, I'm an introvert, by all of those tests, and by my observation of myself. I'm the guy that goes off and reads the book or listens to music and spends a lot of time alone, and that's just fine for me. But it doesn't accomplish what I want to accomplish in life, so that's how it shows up as an excuse. But to develop a compelling vision that's freely chosen, free of your background, free of how you see yourself, your image, it's incredibly powerful. So I think those are three things that need to happen for anyone who wants to claim, in my term, of course, an extraordinary life and really live the life you were born to live.
Right. And like you said, a lot of people being stuck living in their past and not, they're not in a place where they made peace with what happened to them, or maybe some kind of trauma or whatever it might be. A lot of us, experience that, and it is painful. It is uncomfortable to think about it, but we have to find a way to release that, because that's what's actually holding you back. When you still being triggered, in different levels of what happened to you, and you're not looking at it as opportunity to grow and learn from it, that's where you keep yourself stuck and you're not allowing yourself to move forward. When you come to the place where you make that peace, and then you can kind of like forgive yourself and others and move, from that place forward. And that's where you can start imagining and having that vision of who you can be in your life and who you want to be, what you want to do. And a lot of people don't know why they doing what they doing. And a lot of people are not satisfied of where they are, but also taking responsibility for what you created so far, because it's out of your creation. Either you want it or not, but this is what happened because your kind of like subconscious beliefs and a story about who you are that you are buying into, that's what's running your life without you realizing that. So you have to come to this place where you can create that new narrative and, again, like design your life the way you want it. But also, we have to be the ones who taking that responsibility and making those choices intentionally, knowing that we have that power. Because a lot of times we don't see it, or we kind of like start thinking negatively about ourselves, about our skills and abilities, and that's not allow us to grow. And I think a lot of times we need somebody who can mentor or coach us and to show us what are we thinking, because it's hard to catch ourselves being in that negative cycle. And again, it's just us keeping ourselves stuck. But what do you think would be a practice for us to become more mindful and to see what kind of thoughts are happening on a daily basis, so we can kind of like release them as we catch them happening? And if there are any type of maybe habit that you can develop that will help to come to that place.
Anna, first of all, you've pretty much summarized a lot of my book, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you used a word twice that I like a lot, which is release. And it is a process of releasing. It's not particularly about learning anything new. It's about releasing some old. And, we don't have to talk to 4 or 5-year-olds about accomplishment. They're going for what they want. They are expressing themselves fully. They are, you know how they feel at any moment. If they're angry, they're going to let you know. If they're sad, you're going to know. If they're filled with joy, they're a delight to be around, right? If they're fearful, they show it. But what we learn as we get socialized is to cover up a lot of the way we were born, the life we were born to live. That training that I went to all those years ago, the emphasis was on personal responsibility. That's also the main subject of my book, and you mentioned it. Look, we live in a victim culture. That's just the reality. I don't watch a lot of television other than news and sports. I do history is my thing. But I watched a local newscast recently. And, these newscasts, in America at least, it's always a man and a woman. Well, not always, but almost always. And it's, my metaphor for it's Ken and Barbie, the little dolls that are so flat. And, but they're always attractive. I mean, it's a visual medium. And and then they depend on comments from the street, which is one of the reasons I don't watch local news. Frankly, but they get random people on the street and ask them a question, and something had happened in our community. And when they interviewed somebody on the street, and when it went back to the studio, Barbie turned to Ken and said, "Ken," and I'm just using the little doll names, right? "Ken, who's to blame for this?" In that question, for me, that pretty much captures a lot of our culture today. It's all about blame and being a victim. There is no answer to the question, who's to blame for this, that forwards the action, that creates an atmosphere, an environment of accomplishment, of growth, of happiness, of peace. Just in that simple question, it illustrates a cultural aspect of a developed culture, the developed world. I've spent a month on a safari in the Kalahari Desert in Africa. I've spent 2 weeks in the outback in Australia. If you're around indigenous people, they don't blame anybody for anything. They own their experience. They own the relationships that they've created. And it's actually remarkable what we could learn from them. But in this developed world, it leans toward the victim culture. And, I have this attitude about psychologists that many of them are in the profession to get their own product wholesale. But the right therapist can save your life. And fortunately, in my life, one of our adopted kids had something called attachment disorder, the failure to bond with the primary parent. And he had been horribly abused, even tortured, by the time he was 4 years old when he came into our home. So there's a lot of work. And we found that therapist that can save your life. He's retired now, Dr. Jim Janelle. But I've learned so much about him. And one of the things was that he talked about readiness. That something has happened in our life where we're ready. We're ready for some kind of growth, some kind of, you mentioned that term, release. And I haven't used that recently, so I'm going to steal it from you. But, some kind of a breakthrough that's going to get us out of the culture to be able to operate independent of all that negativity, independent of all that those victim statements that keep us stuck and with no power. I've often stated to people that what happens when you get personal responsibility is you get your power back. And, power is it can be a negative thing, but I'll tell you, without it, not much gets accomplished. Getting your personal power back that's what happened for me. I didn't realize that I didn't have the words, but when I left that seminar all those years ago, I realized I create my life. And if I want it to be better, that's up to me. No one else is going to do it for me.
Right. And like you said, taking that power back, that's what we need. Every time we blame somebody or, assign that to some external factor, why we don't have a certain thing or why we're feeling a certain way, every time we do that, we just give that power away. And we think somebody else will come and save us or something will happen that will change the way we feel. But it's never going to happen until you make that decision. But first, you have to accept yourself for, who you are at this moment in time, for everything that happened to you until this point. You have to kind of accept everything, good or bad, and take a look at it from a different perspective and try to see something, that you learn from it or find some strength in that. And with that power back, with that responsibility, then you will see how you are the one who's going to change that for yourself, and you become a deliberate creator of your own reality that you want to see yourself in, right? But again, like with you owning everything that you are, that is important, because a lot of times people escape from experiencing certain feelings or emotions because it brings them maybe some kind of discomfort or pain. So they looking into ways to maybe some kind of addiction or something to distract themselves and not look into that. And by them avoiding it, procrastinated, that's actually, it's not going to solve the issue, and it will continue keeping you stuck in the same place. Nothing will change. But it takes courage to look into yourself and actually see everything that you've been through, and give yourself that self-love and self-compassion and be kind to yourself. A lot of people identify themselves through their experiences as, if something that they did or made that decision, so they might label themselves as being a bad person or something. Or, if something happened to them, they also live in that victim mindset. But it's not going to get you out of it. It's not going to bring you any benefit with you keep thinking about it, because those thoughts create certain feelings. And again, like you kind of like live in that self-inflicted suffering all the time. And we're not supposed to live like that. We're supposed to be joyful, happy, and knowing what we want, and kind of like having those experiences deliberately and creating something. But now with us continue this negative cycle of thoughts, is just us keeping, in the same place. So something has to change, and it has to change starting with you. Don't you think so?
Yeah, that's that thing that Dr. Chanel talks about readiness. He's extremely successful, but he rejects a lot of patients or refers them to someone else because he wants to be productive with people. He wants to really support them in their growth. And what he's learned is that no matter how skillful he is, no matter how much insight he has, if people aren't ready, it's not going to happen. They have to be hungry for that change. And, we resist change. Our image is so important to us, and we protect it consciously and unconsciously. So any kind of a change is very threatening. And, that fight or flight thing that psychologists identified long ago, we either fight it or we run away from it. And then we wonder why things haven't shifted for us. When my book was first introduced, Anna, the PR company sent copies out to the press and television, people like that, and influencers. And then I'd go around and do interviews. And what I learned is that when the book arrives, the interviewer generally doesn't read it. It's sent to some intern or some assistant or some secretary to come up with 5 questions. And one of them, by the way, is always snarky. It's always negative. That's the other thing I learned. It's like they must teach that in journalism school, I guess. But the part of the book that got commented on most often is a very simple sentence. And that sentence is that life is simple. This does not mean it is easy. Now, in the book, I go into more detail in the book, but basically is that a common belief that really gets in the way for people, in my experience, is that life is complicated and it's supposed to be easy. The great teachers for thousands of years have taught the opposite. The Buddhists say all life is suffering. Our job is to surmount that. Dr. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, he now has a book that sold more copies than my book, so I don't like him. But and I'm teasing about that. But he says life is tragic. and we need to handle the tragedy that life often is. And it's not going to be easy. There's hard work involved. So that whole notion, that belief that life is easy, that life is complicated and it's supposed to be easy. The great teachers, Lao Tzu or Confucius in the East, certainly Rumi and the other poets, the Persian poets, the Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, back when I was a young guy working in New York City, was talking about this stuff 40 years ago. And or Think and Grow Rich, probably the greatest personal development book ever written. And I hate saying that because I've got a personal development book, but and certainly the Holy Bible. You know, that the truth is out there, and it's actually pretty simple. It's just not easy.
Right. And when we think something is simple, we always assume, it can be this way, right? So if it's that simple, it should be some kind of trick, it should be something that I'm not seeing. But have you tried it? Have you actually made, those type of steps towards implementing that in your life? And the answer is always no, because people think it's too simple for them. It needs to be complicated in their mind, and that becomes another obstacle for not doing it, or making another excuse why they would not start doing that. Because what's the point if I'm already failed that in my mind? So in order to kind of like see result for yourself, you have to take steps towards that direction, and that would be enough evidence for you to see that something is working. But without you even trying and coming up with a worst case scenario in your mind why it wouldn't work, it's not gonna give you any result at all. And how's it working for you in that case, right? So, and it's very fascinating to see how people talk themselves out of becoming the best version of who they can be, because each one of us were born with a certain talents, gifts that they could share with others, if only we allow ourselves to be that person. But again, like you said, we have to be ready for it. We have to be ready to go to that next level, to overcome our fears, insecurities, whatever negative or self-limiting beliefs that you might have. You can overcome them, but you have to face them. Are you courageous enough to face them and heal and go forward with your life?
A really positive place, Anna, would be kind of like sometimes bumper sticker wisdom, these little one-liners. Many times they're like taking an aspirin to fix a headache, but sometimes they really have value. And the one I've always liked is, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Have you been telling the same story about how unhappy you are for too long? And finally you get tired of your own story. And I've fallen into that a couple of times in my life. And you have to laugh at yourself when you finally realize it. It's just hilarious. The mind games, the verbal games that we play with ourselves. I spent from 2015 through 2020, 6 years. I've lived abroad 23 years of my working life, but I spent 6 years in China and working around Asia, and doing a lot more public speaking than I have done before. And for an introvert, that's a stretch, by the way, and it was good for me. But one of the things I talked about was excuses, and the little story that I told that seemed to resonate with audiences, at least in terms of laughter and engagement, was I said, I'm thinking of a new business. I'm going to franchise it, and a shop that sells excuses. That you go in and you get one excuse for $100, but you could get 5 excuses for $300. You can make deals like that. And because we have old, tired excuses. So at least you could buy some new ones. And I'm doing the short version of this thing, but I noticed how many people were, they're laughing because they can see themselves in that story. And I don't know about you, but I've done that sometimes. I've had my own story and my own excuses, but again, it just takes you away from your natural power. It's ultimately an excuse is a victim story, so I know we're getting close to the end. How do you want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering how people can find you in online space for those who would like to connect with you and learn more about your book, how they can find you.
The best place is my website, which is therobertwhite.com. And therobertwhite.com. And if you click on resources, you'll find my books. And if you buy them from me, you get it signed. If you buy it from Amazon, it's available there on Kindle and softcover and hardcover and all that. But if you scroll down on that resource page, you get an opportunity to sign up for a free service that I've offered for the past 12 years. It's called an Extraordinary Minute. It's an idea that something I've read, something I've heard, something that I've been working on, and then my comments about it, all designed to be read in 1 minute or less. So it comes once a week. And included in that is a 28-page PDF that is shareable. And it's what I've learned about success, working, now with 1,300,000 people in companies that I've founded and led. I've rewritten it about 50 times. So it's my best thinking about those qualities in our lives that we need to pay attention to if we want to live an extraordinary life. And it's free.
Wow. Great tool to have, and I'll put in the episode description all of the links that you mentioned for people to check out for themselves and start taking that power back and being in charge of their life. Because either whether you think you can or you think you can, you're right. Well, what story are you telling yourself? So that's important to think about. And I'm glad that we had that conversation today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and wisdom. And I hope you enjoy your day.
It's all about relationships. I'm delighted we connected. I'm delighted when people get engaged with my little email thing, and because it creates a relationship where we can interact in a way that's positive and where we can support each other in creating the life we were born to live.
Yes, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, hit the subscribe button and share it with others. Stay tuned.